Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me, in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Again, I say that was an interesting name I chose back in 2013 when I started to make videos after reading books for almost 10 years. I thought to myself, what the heck is all this knowledge good for if I don't share it? And it has been a very interesting time reading an eclectic group of books, a variety of different topics, ranging from the psychic research, the occult, to material organizations like the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Zionists, the Communists, the Illuminati, and all the things in between what they do. Here's one book I've been looking at. The Aquarian Conspiracy, Personal and Social Transformation in the 80s. By Marilyn Ferguson. So on the back of it, this is not the book I'm going to go over, but it just seems to have a very interesting message. A leaderless but powerful network is working to bring about radical change in the United States. You think? Its members have broken with certain key elements of Western thought, and they may have even broken continuity with history. So apparently, somebody's rewriting history. They need to eliminate the foundation, a huge part of the foundation that built America and the world, Europe, South America, Central America, Christianity. And I agree, it has many facets, and a lot of the Christians originators like the Vatican and Rome and the Pope, I don't think that their intents at all times were benevolent, and in many instances it was malevolent. It was even sinister. I give you that. And I think the destructive element of Christianity, and even with the Muslims and other religions, they're using the negative part of it to destroy the good part of it. And there was a lot of good throughout history. Sending priests and other preachers all over the world trying to civilize the planet that was, in many cases, anything but civilized. Strangely enough, somebody's trying to bring back the less than socialized, civilized world, something with chaos and anarchy, and they say that. So they have taken themselves, these elites, and they have their mansions and their yachts and their wealth, and they're building up fences around their communities, and they're building up a fortress of security devices to monitor the rest of us, to enslave the rest of us. And of course they got books like this, Forbidden Science, Jacques Vallée. They're bringing out topics like UFOs and aliens. So they're distorting history, they're rewriting it. And a lot of people are buying it. Global warming, global cooling. Take your pick. If you can't pick either one of them, go with climate change. And guess what? We humans caused it. That's what they say. Even earthquakes, we humans are bringing that about. We're causing that. Although you and I had nothing to do with it, generally speaking, the people watching this video, we're not part of the elite network. They don't have to watch this video. They know what's going on. Anyways, many years ago I read this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, John Perkins. Like I said, I was reading books for almost 10 years before I got to the point that I could start making videos. As any other researcher or aspirant to be a writer person, most people do a lot of research and then write a book. And that was my intent. But technologies change, things change. If I've learned anything in my life, I have learned that things change. And in a sort of a way, you really can't look back. You can only press forward. Regrettably, a lot of people all over the planet have surrendered and come to some kind of acceptance of this new age and new world order. And I say regrettably because there is and are plans to bring about a reality that later on people will say, if only we would have known, we could have done something. Well, I've been making videos, and so have a lot of other people, and we do know, and we can change it and stop it. But we have to get down to some basic understandings. One, we do not live in a solely materialistic world where everything operates on the fundamentals of physics and mathematics that we think and believe. A lot of people have given up on the religious concept. Even a lot of people will tell you, when I die, I die. I have no soul. There is nothing else. A lot of people have been convinced that's true, when anything could be the furthest from the truth. And a lot of that is coming out. Even if you watch those people on the internet, on YouTube and alternate websites, the channelers, the psychics, the astrologers, where do you think they're getting that information from? And then we find out through those channelers that the Anunnaki, the reptilians, gray aliens, light beings, all kinds of entities exist. And I'm not trying to promote UFOs and aliens and some galactic army of ships are coming this way. I think that's part of the deception and the lie. I am saying that there is an invisible reality, and it's all around us. Another plane of existence that we can't see, with living entities in it. Not as dense as we are, but a lot of them spiritual beings, and there may be several different layers of this density, these different dimensions. I think if my investigation has exposed anything, it has exposed that. And I think the evil people, here's the key, that are controlling our planet, much to the suffering and detriment to the rest of us. They brought about the economic collapses, the world wars, 9/11, and so much more pain and suffering and theft and death and sexual perversions and murder. We weren't the ones, we individuals, polluting rivers or building nuclear power plants right on the shores of our nations. The elites were. And when they polluted the waterway, like they're polluting it now, even with Fukushima, it seems like they're trying to cover it up. Yet again, I was listening to a video this morning, Steve Quayle, who's written a lot of books and been on a lot of videos, lectures, talk shows, and he says the solution to Fukushima, as per the governmental powers that be, is the solution is dilution. And if you go look up at the pictures of Fukushima, the solution has been to pump all the water into these gigantic plastic containers, look like little water tanks, oil tanks. You see where they store gas? Thousands of them all over the land behind the Fukushima nuclear power plant. So anyways, they have a problem. They're accumulating more and more drums of this water. And if Steve Quayle is correct, they're going to use the solution is dilution remedy. They're going to dump all that into the Pacific Ocean. And they've already been having major impacts discovered, fish dying, non-existent, and even genetically altered creatures, mutations, because of the radiation. So I can say with all accuracy, with 100% belief, we're in trouble on planet Earth. We the people need to wake up. And there is a higher power. And we need to involve that higher power in the solution. Because I believe, whether you want to call it God or your higher power or some hierarchy with angels and all that, that world does have the solution. So whether we need its support or it needs us to call on it, however that works, it needs to be done. And just further proof was this book. Early in my investigation, which started in 2005, this is one of the first books I read. And on my series that I'm going to put it in is number 7, series number 7 of Freemasonry and Satanism. Because as I was making videos back then, I didn't have the idea of a series. As I made each video, I called it Series 1, Series 2, Series 3. And later on, when I realized I had made different videos by the same author, I went back and gave them all one series number, which left a few holes in my list of videos that you can find on my website, rickmiracle.com, on the top left-hand side. Cut and paste that list onto your own computer, print it out, and you can have a little cheat sheet so you can select the topics that you want, whether it is UFO, aliens, Whitley Schreiber, psychic research, and so much more, the Phoenix Journals, Henry Ford, the American International Jew, the Jewish Problem, the New World Order, Psychic World. I'm just looking at some of my books. The Holy Bible, Peter Moon's books, Philadelphia Experiment, Channeling, Edgar Casey, The Occult, Masonry, The Lost Book of Enki, ISIS Unveiled, Secret Doctrine, Rosie Crucian, Bloody Zion, Lost Star, The Creature from Jekyll Island, The Case for UFOs, so much more videos I make. Well, we're up to series number 143, and there's about 300 videos on YouTube. That's about 500 hours. So, not to be bragging, but I know a little bit. And I also know that a lot of other people have made a lot of great videos on 9/11, the fake moon landings, the assassination of President John Kennedy, UFO aliens, psychic research, so much. So I encourage people to get a little organized, come up with a little plan on the topics you want to go research, take some notes. But that's why I made my videos the way I did. It could certainly save somebody a lot of time. What I wouldn't have given so that I didn't have to take 13 years to get where I am right now. I don't think other people have 13 years. So I just came up with the brilliant idea. I'll make these videos. I'll make them about books. I'll read from the books. And maybe I could take away a little bit of the doubt. Because a lot of people were telling me, Rick, I believe something's going on. I just don't know what's going on. So John Perkins tells us that he was recruited, along with a lot of other people, to go around the world and encourage presidents and prime ministers and kings, religious leaders, whoever ran the country, to borrow millions, billions of dollars to make themselves personally very wealthy, and also promises about a gross national product, their country would become more wealthy, including the people's. And in this book it admits full well that they never intended for the citizens to be wealthy or successful. As a matter of fact, the citizens were going to be enslaved if they were originally free as natives. And if they were already enslaved a little bit, they would be further enslaved and locked into a system they couldn't get out of. And all of their environment all around them would be destroyed. Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the international word-of-mouth bestseller, the shocking inside story of how America took over the world, John Perkins. Now think about it. If you're watching my video, you're probably not one of the elites, one of the paid for and controlled senators, representatives, presidents, CEOs of oil companies and all that. People working in the CIA at high levels who know what's going on. I suspect a lot of people at the lower levels don't know, just like the Freemasonry and other secret society organizations. The new recruits and the lower level members don't know a thing. They think they're in it for a social function or to further their careers. And even people who initially joined the secret services, CIA, FBI, police stations, you know, do they really believe they're getting in there and they're going to be part of a SWAT team and they're going to be targeting citizens like you or I? Jade Helm 15, where they have computer software programs making decisions by meta tags, things that you watched, books that you purchased, people you know, phone calls you made, the fact you might own a gun, and when they announced everybody had to turn them in, you decided you weren't going to do it, but they know you haven't. Because once you mentioned it on Facebook or something. They're bringing us a kind of a crazy world, like the movies Hunger Games. New World Order. And it's been going on for quite a while. These people were part of the secret societies. Even Aldous Huxley, The Brave New World, 1984. All those books. I've been going over them. Go look up the list of my videos. The Conspiracy. H.G. Wells. I made videos on that. The New World Order. So I'm going to read a little bit from this, and it should be self-explanatory. Well, I think we'll start out reading the preface. It seems to be full of valuable information. And I personally do not think that John Perkins is lying. 500 hours of video hours on YouTube, hundreds of books later, thousands of videos I watched. Again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, just making a point. I think I know a little bit about what's going on. And even the leaders announced the new age. Posters everywhere, rainbow colors, lots of propaganda, transgenderism, pansexualism, sex with anything. trying to eliminate or lower the age for sex with children, pedophilia, spirit cooking, Pizzagate during the last election, and no investigations by the FBI into the people involved, with pretty much clear proof that something bizarre is going on, something bizarre was going on. And I don't think these people into these dark cults, organizations, secret societies, are going to change their ways, irregardless of what some people are saying, that the cabals are losing the battle and they're being arrested. I think it's just more of the deception. But let me read from this book, and then let you decide. And of course, I encourage people, if they are curious and they want to know more, go find this book. All the books I've been going over. I cannot and I do not want to make audiobooks, but I do read from the books of stuff that I pre-read and underline, so that we can at least get a gist of what's in the books. So, economic hitman, EHMs, are highly paid professionals who cheat countries around the globe out of trillions of dollars. They funnel money from the World Bank, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the USAID, and other foreign aid organizations into the coffers of huge corporations and the pockets of a few wealthy families who control the planet's natural resources. So can we say that several of those families are the Fritz Springmeyer's, his book I've gone over, The Bloodlines of the Illuminati, and even the PhD Jewish author Henry Mackau in Canada wrote the book, The Illuminati, the Cult That Hijacked the World. And of course we all are aware of communism, and people will snicker. You've been programmed to snicker. Communism, creating communes. They're trying to do it. New world order, one world government, one world religion. What part of that doesn't equal communism? And who created communism? That would be Zionism. And there's some malevolent, in my opinion, Jewish people who think they are the divine or the aristocrats of the world, the kings, the queens, the dukes. And a lot of them have changed their names, and so they could get into high office, senators, House of Representatives, all over the world, presidents, leaders, pretending they're Christians and so forth. So they've infiltrated all of the systems. I've made plenty of videos, there's plenty of evidence to verify that's true. And they do have intentions, because obviously, if we were all allowed to be safe and sound and financially secure, we would take the time to ponder, talk amongst ourselves, read books, go to school, and become a little bit more aware and knowledgeable, and find out what they're up to, and then put a stop to that, so they have to defend themselves and prevent us from getting to that point. So they crash the economic system all the time. They create all kinds of distraction all the time. They create terrorism, false flags, create legislation to police us, causing economic hardship, even CIA involvement, according to many videos and books I've seen. High levels of the people who are involved in cocaine trade, marijuana, other drugs, opium. Apparently, Afghanistan had almost been put out of business in the opium trade when powerful people in the governments were offering to help them change their crops from opium to foodstuffs. And that was taking place on a serious level. But then, of course, after 9/11, some powerful people got in there and got the opium trade back up. So there is a lot of insiders, elitists into the marijuana trade, cocaine trade, opium trade, etc. And even recently, according to Dr. McCullough, an article a friend of mine sent me, they're taking over the food industries. I mean, everything. And the drink industries, the beer industries. So these elitists that are already poisoning us and toxifying our waterways, our water, even the medicines with mercury, and creating biological weapons, plague materials and stuff in laboratories, and have plans for depopulating the planet, they're going to be in control of everything. Anyways, I can go off here, but let me read what it says here. So the pockets of a few wealthy families who control the planet's natural resources. Their tools include fraudulent financial reports, rigged elections, payoff, extortion, sex, and murder. They play a game as old as empire, but one that has taken on new and terrifying dimensions during this time of globalization. And John Perkins says, I should know. I was an EHM, an economic hitman. I wrote that in 1982 as the beginning of a book. with the working title, Conscience of an Economic Hitman. So instead of Confessions, his first book was going to be called Conscience. The book was dedicated to the presidents of two countries, men who had been my clients, whom I respected and thought of as kindred spirits. Jamie Roldos, I'm sure I'm saying these names wrong, President of Ecuador, and Omar Troyojus, President of Panama. Both had just died in fiery crashes. Their deaths were not accidental. They were assassinated because they opposed that fraternity of corporate, government, and banking heads whose goal is global empire. We economic hitmen, EHMs, failed to bring Roldos and Trujillos around, and the other type of hitman, the CIA-sanctioned jackals, who were always right behind us, stepped in. So they'll spearhead operations to convince presidents with huge bribes of money, millions of dollars, and to have their country borrow millions and billions, knowing full well that the country would not be able to pay back the loans, and then would be indebted to these people and the United Nations in bankruptcy proceedings, and be guided into this one world order. And again, John Perkins is a lot smarter guy than I am. When you listen to what I read in this book, or go look him up on Wikipedia, his education, his world travels. So when he's telling us this information, we ought to listen. Anyways, he said on his first book, I was persuaded to stop writing that book. I started it 4 more times during the next 20 years. So some people have a conscience. Not everybody. Some people can deceive people, steal, even have people killed. Doesn't bother them at all. And remember, I keep saying there's this invisible reality, spiritual entities, even within our own bodies. Some of us have a frequency more towards good. And some people have a propensity towards evil. That's a fact. Not everybody's the same. You take Jesus, for example, this is perfect, straight up. And on the just to the right of it is 100% perfect good, and just to the left of it is 100% perfect evil. So Lucifer, Satan, would be evil. This stuff exists. They don't abduct people in the Illuminati, witchcraft groups, people into blood libels. The Jews were accused of that over the centuries, a couple thousand years. Not all Jewish people were into the Kabbalah or the occult. And there's plenty of evidence. I made videos on that stuff. I found all the books, 100 years old. Mayans were sacrificing people. So apparently this invisible reality is somehow connected to this material world we live in. And there are people into these religions, these evil religions, not to be confused with good religions, where, again, entities came into this world, and we know them as prophets, messiahs, and all kinds of other people who were communicating with the other side. So I'm just saying, some people have a conscience. And apparently this John Perkins, when he got recruited, because he came from an elite family, went to an elite school, these people on the dark side are looking for recruits all the time. And that's why they use the secret societies. In my opinion, they'll take 20 new recruits and might find one person who will go to the dark side. And that person will move right up, get the 32 degrees, wind up being somebody in government or running a huge corporation or high-level position in the CIA or other organizations that don't have any problem assassinating somebody. So guess what I'm trying to say? These people do exist. And unless we people, general population out there, who are good people, good souls, wake up and acknowledge it, we're in trouble if we don't. We can see what's going on around us. The TV programming is just a bit bizarre, putting it mildly, from when I was a kid to what they have now. All right, so he was persuaded to stop writing that book. I started it 4 more times during the next 20 years. On each occasion, my decision to begin again was influenced by current world events, the U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989, the first Gulf War, Somalia, the rise of Osama bin Laden. Remember, the U.S. government financed and trained and supported Osama bin Laden. There goes my phone. Sorry about that. I have to answer it. I don't want to make any money. So anyways, however, threats or bribes always convinced me to stop. And I will say that I was they tried to recruit me. Gotta get the exact words in my brain. But I received letters in the mail and invitations to join a certain group or two, and even other business deals that were shady in my career. But thank God I was wise enough to run and not take the money. In 2003, the president of a major publishing house that is owned by a powerful international corporation read a draft of what had now become Confessions of an Economic Hitman, this book. He described it as a riveting story that needs to be told. Then he smiled sadly, shook his head, and told me that since the executives at world headquarters might object, he could not afford to risk publishing it. He advised me to fictionalize it. But this is not fiction. It is a true story of my life. A more courageous publisher, not one owned by the international corporation, has agreed to help me tell it. And again, like I talked about the essay on the internet that a friend sent me by Dr. McCullough, famous medical advisor, supplements, etc. A lot of people love him. But that a lot of the huge corporations are taking over many of the food manufacturers and even drink manufacturers, beer manufacturers, consolidating it down to a few individuals, a small number of corporations, and they can weaponize this stuff against us. And when you read this book and you see how much they've done already, and many of the other videos I've made, the evil is out there. The secret societies are out there. And apparently they thrive on murder and theft and torture and sexual perversions and some kind of sick, sinister, satanic religious cults. I can't emphasize it enough with the stuff I found out. The story must be told. We live in a time of terrible crisis. So when was this book published? 2005. Remember, we're 2017 now. And back in 2005, 4 years after 2001, 9/11, we live in a time of terrible crisis. And in my opinion, it's getting worse. For those people who are still surviving, making money, jumping in the pool, having a birthday party, not part of the millions, untold millions killed or under attack today, they don't seem to care. They're not even aware. They watch the nightly news. They believe that. They believe the Russians are evil. The Chinese are evil. The Koreans are evil. The Arabs are evil. The Mexicans are evil. The Christian straight people are now haters. They're not going along with the new age. But the people who are all apathetic, who don't care, I regret to say this, you will care one day, but it may be too late. So John Perkins, again, I emphasize, I believe him. He's an educated man, world traveler, working for the biggest corporations, convincing presidents and leaders to do things that even he thinks is disgusting, and he says this story must be told. We live in a time of terrible crisis. I believe him. Go look at some channelers talking on the internet, and they'll tell you, don't think about anything negative. You are God. You can manifest anything you want. Nice story. But I think it would have some strings attached to it if people didn't pay attention to all the negative going on. Why do you think they tell people to not think of the negative? So we live in a time of terrible crisis. The story of this particular economic hitman is the story of how we got to where we are and why we currently face crises that seem insurmountable. This story must be told because only by understanding our past mistakes will we be able to take advantage of future opportunities. Because 9/11 happened, and so did the second war in Iraq, because in addition to the 3,000 people who died on September 11th, 2001, at the hands of terrorists, and regrettably, it wasn't some homegrown terrorist, it was a seriously inside, intelligently organized event. It took a lot of planning. Those buildings fell just as if they become invisible. Demolition. Building 1. Building 2. Building 3 wasn't even hit, and it just dissolved. And there's plenty of books over there. I've gone over some of them. 911 Synthetic Terror by Webster Tarpley. and other books and so many videos on YouTube, just like the chemtrails, the chemicals they're dumping in the sky. 911 was obviously part of the plan, the catalyst to help move forward with the overthrow and destructions of all those countries in the Middle East, and to enact legislation and to take action against we the people in Europe and America and probably the rest of the world to further this new world order. And they continue to blame us for everything. Anyways, back to the book. So it really wasn't some homegrown terrorist out of some caves. And it says here 24,000 people die every day because they are unable to obtain life-sustaining food, which is really crazy when you consider how much money they're spending on wars and weapons and weaponry systems, cameras, computer systems to monitor and control the rest of us. What it would take to give everybody a decent house and food is a drop in the bucket compared to what they spend on all these wars and efforts to bring about the New World Order. Most importantly, this story must be told today. For the first time in history, one nation has the ability, the money, and the power to change all this. So I suspect John Perkins was aware of what he was involved in, but he probably didn't know about all the secret societies that control all the people in politics and leadership and money banks in our world, like Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said during a heated argument in their parliament, Congress, whatever you call it over there. He said, don't worry about the USA. We control the USA, and the Americans know it. So our political leaders know who butters their bread, who pays them and puts them in office. But we, the citizens, don't know it. We keep believing in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and it's almost like a tennis ball going back and forth with the president, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, from the same elitist groups and families who, as advisors and support teams, hire the same people. True or false? It is the nation where I was born and the one I served as an EHM, the United States of America. So John Perkins says here, what finally convinced me to ignore the threats and the bribes? The short answer is that my only child, Jessica, graduated from college and went out into the world on her own. When I recently told her that I was considering publishing this book and shared my fears with her, she said, don't worry, Dad. If they get you, I'll take over where you left off. We need to do this for the grandchildren I hope to give you someday. That is the short answer. Now, people may wonder why I started this investigation, trying to figure out what I call WTH. What the heck is going on in our world? Is I realized something was going on back then after 2001. And I had a big zero birthday in 2005, and I went down to Costa Rica, sat at a tiki bar, and I was the only American. And people from all over the world said they felt sorry for we Americans because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what our government was into. We were all ignorant. And of course I was offended, and I thought, wow, how can that be? But when I went back to Florida, I started to get on my computer and do some homework. And they were right. I was wrong. So I started researching. Innocently enough, I just wanted to use my technical career. I did work at a major aerospace company, an engineering electronic technician. Spent most of my time in research and development with scientists and engineers. And after 10 years, I, like thousands of other people, days before Christmas, got laid off. So anyways, they told me lots of stuff. I did my research, and I kept finding that everything they said was true. So then I decided I would do some research, and it would cost me 10 years of my life before I would write a book. I mean, how can you go out and write a book without doing some homework? So as the time went on, and I had read so many books, was reading press releases, typing in comments at the comment section, and people were commenting back, some agreeing with me, some screaming at me, some telling me I would be dead tomorrow. One comment I said on there, we shouldn't be killing people, and some guy commented back and said, Rick, you're crazy. I thought, how do I even deal with people who say I'm crazy when I say we shouldn't be killing people? But I guess some people's perception of reality is just different than mine. Like I said at the beginning of this video, there are people who are good souls, raised in good families. Some people raised in bad families and have good souls. They see what's going on and they come out and tell us. Plenty of those whistleblowers from the Illuminati, from people recruited in Hollywood for these organizations. They get on there and they cry on TV and say what they had to do. Some people in good families apparently wind up being born with bad souls, and they do evil things to the horror of their whole family. So that's the first step, is a lot of people are now being convinced there's no such thing as good and evil, right and wrong. You can do whatever you want. It's just an experience. Go watch some of those channelers channeling some entities from the other side, another dimension, and that's what they say. Back to the book. The longer version relates to my dedication to the country where I was raised, to my love of the ideals expressed by our founding fathers, to my deep commitment to the American Republic that today promises life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and they're trying to take that away. Make no mistake about that. If I've done anything with all these hours of videos I made, it is we have enemies in charge of our countries and huge corporations. And we, the people, are the target, are their enemy. So they think. And they don't want people to be religious anymore. Whatever religion. They teach it in the schools. Separation of church and state. Think about that. They want Christianity and all that out of the government. But they belong to these secret satanic cults. And they control the government. So it's our religion they don't want in the government, not their satanic secret society cults. So religion is embedded in government, although it be an evil religion. If you don't believe it, look at the back of the US $1 bill and see the triangle with the eye, with the rays behind it, and go do some research and find out what that means. That's Horus, the god over there in the Egyptian hieroglyphics with the bird head, hawk head, and his mother and father were Isis. You ever heard of Isis? And Osiris, connected with Ra, Moloch, Lucifer, Satan. I've gone over the Rosicrucian material. All right, back to the book. So life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all people everywhere, and to my determination after 9/11 not to sit idly by any longer while EHM's economic hitman turned that republic into a global empire. So Mr. Perkins here, John, says we need to stop this global empire. Who controls the global empire? This would be the Zionists, the Illuminati secret society types, the communists, the banksters, the people who bring us these wars. They make a lot of money. There goes the fun again. So John Perkins says that is the skeleton version of the long answer. The flesh and blood are added in the chapters that follow. This is a true story. I lived every minute of it. The sights, the people, the conversations, the feelings I described were all a part of my life. It is my personal story, and yet it happened within the larger context of world events that have shaped our history, have brought us to where we are today, and formed the foundation of our children's futures. I have made every effort to present the experiences, people, conversations accurately. Whenever I discuss historical events or recreate conversations with other people, I do so with the help of several tools, published documents, personal records and notes, recollections, my own and those of others who participated, the 5 manuscripts I began previously, and the historical accounts by other authors, most notably recently published ones that disclose information that formerly was classified or otherwise unavailable. References are provided in the endnotes to allow interested readers to pursue these subjects in more depth. In some cases, I combined several dialogues I had with a person into one conversation to facilitate the flow of the narrative. My publisher asked whether we actually referred to ourselves as economic hitmen. I assured him that we did, although usually we only use the initials EHM. In fact, on the day in 1971, when I began working with my teacher, Claudine, she informed me, my assignment is to mold you into an economic hitman. No one can know about your involvement, not even your wife. Then she turned serious. Once you're in for life. After that, she seldom used the full name. We were simply EHM's economic hitman. So the only organization I'm aware of that says once you're in, you're always in, that would be, of course, the mafia. Once you get in there, you can't get out. And apparently at the high level of these secret societies, Illuminati or witchcraft or Zionist or any of these organizations, once you get in, you probably can't get out. You become part of this elite group who have sinister plans for the rest of us. Claudine's role is a fascinating example of the manipulation that underlines the business I had entered. Beautiful and intelligent, she was highly effective. She understood my weaknesses and used them to her great advantage. Her job and the way she executed it exemplified the subtlety of the people behind this system. I've got plenty of books of people behind this system that tell all. It's quite horrible. Claudine pulled no punches when describing what I would be called upon to do. My job, she said, was to encourage world leaders to become part of a vast network that promotes the U.S. commercial interest. The U.S. commercial interest, the huge corporations, not the USA citizens. You don't get into the Congress or the House of Representatives or the presidents unless you're part of these elite groups or are recruited by these elite groups, and they have something on you, and they have groomed you, and they have tested you. In the end, those leaders become ensnarled in a web of depth that ensures their loyalty. So another thing, when these elitists get so much money and huge mansions and yachts and kids in the best school, that costs a lot of money. So once they get in, if they want to stay in and live that lifestyle, they've got to do what they're told. They're bought and paid for. In the end, these leaders become ensnarled in a world of depth that ensures their loyalty. We can draw on them whenever we desire to satisfy our political, economic, and military needs. Now remember, There is a plan for a new age and a new world order. There is something called the Protocols of Zion. There is a book I went over and made a video on, 3 2-hour videos. The Jewish Utopia. The book written by Robert Williams, The Ultimate New World Order. Or is it William Roberts? Sometimes I forget some of the simplest things. Just looking to see if I can see the book. The Jewish Utopia, series number 67, Freemasonry and Satanism. It's right over there on my bookshelf. So to satisfy our political, economic, and military needs. In turn, they bolster their political positions by bringing industrial parks, power plants, and airports to their people. The owners of U.S. engineering construction companies become fabulously wealthy. Today we see the results of this system run amok. Executives of our most respected companies hire people. This is all over the world, believe it or not. Executives at the most respected companies hire people at near slave wages to toil under inhuman conditions in Asian sweatshops. So we buy these shirts and other clothing and other things cheap. We have no idea what's going on in these sweatshops all over the world. If we remember American history, and we had the sweatshops and then we had the unions, they were polluting the rivers with tanning factories, making shoes and other chemicals. And all that had to be stopped in the USA. But the huge corporations just went overseas to other countries with the natives living happily in clean environments, drinking clean water. But all that was changed. Back to the book. Oil companies wantonly pumped toxins into rainforest rivers, consciously killing people, animals, plants, and committing genocide among ancient cultures. So let's just say down there in South America, they wanted to put a dam up or something for power, and the natives did not want their environment destroyed. I can understand that. Those natives probably, and from my research in many cases, were machine gunned to death. And look what they did when they developed these countries. They didn't leave them in good shape. Things aren't better for those people. Just the power structure is stronger. The pharmaceutical industry denies life-saving medicines to millions of HIV-infected Africans. Well, AIDS, Ebola by Leonard Horowitz, that book I went over, tells all. Looks like these AIDS and other plagues and viruses were created in laboratories and put out there in LA and New York and Africa. And apparently those things will likely be used against the people on the planet eventually. They didn't invent those things for nothing. Part of the reason they came up with the biological weapons, the plagues and viruses, etc., is it's a cleaner way of killing off all the people without destroying the infrastructure, the roads and bridges and buildings. So if they do take out millions of people in some states or a country, even 1 billion, they will just move other people from another country into our apartments and houses. Probably who will pay through the nose to get them. Another economic boom for these New World Order elitists who are apparently into some sinister, satanic, Luciferic religion, including Anunnaki, reptilians, and Palladians, so it seems, beings from the dark side. Are there any beings from the good side? In heaven or whatever, angels trying to help us? Well, Apparently the other reality sent Jesus, and look what they did to Jesus. They crucified him. They didn't like his message and commandment that we are to love one another. Suppose on the other side they would probably be saying, well, we shouldn't send anybody else. They'll just kill them. They don't want love on earth. It's not that we the people don't want love. It's the people who control our planet. And because they live their opulent lives with their perversions, they don't want love. 12 million families in our own United States worry about their next meal. The energy industry created the Enron. The accounting industry created the Anderson. The income ratio of 1/5 of the world's population in the wealthiest countries to the 1/5 in the poorest went from 30 to 1 in 1960 to 74 to 1 in 1995. So things have gotten worse with all this industrialization and modernization of the world. And bridges and infrastructure and housing communities all across the world are in deterioration. Nobody's investing money in those things for our benefit. Matter of fact, they want to depopulate the planet. You don't believe me? Look up the Georgia, USA Guidestones and see where it says they want a world population of 500 million. And apparently it was the Rosicrucians who put that Stonehenge up there. So know where it's coming from. The secret societies, these cults I keep talking about. That's why I have to add that into this reading of this book. It isn't just men and women on the planet who are just selfish and greedy. There's something bigger behind it. They don't want to destroy Christianity or people's belief in God or their own spirits for nothing. They have to have people not believing. The United States spends over $87 billion conducting a war in Iraq, while the United Nations estimates that for less than half that amount, we could provide clean water, adequate diets, sanitation services, and basic education to every person on the planet. Remember, this guy, John Perkins, was a smart, educated man, worked for world corporations, met with presidents and other leaders, organizing electric power plants and bridges and dams and so much more. He was not a stupid guy. He happened to have a conscience. He happened to be one of the people who could see from the logic side of good. And they tried to buy him off. And the next sentence it says here, and we wonder why terrorists attack us. Well, from my research, the terrorists that do the attacking are part of the insiders, elite, sinister people's plan to use it as a mind control tactic against us, to make us believe it's one of our own kind doing the terror attack. And I challenge anybody out there, if you think this is not true, that it's not us, go out there and try to buy a bomb or a bazooka. You can't do it. You'll be arrested before you can snap your fingers. So where do these people get these planes and helicopters and dump trucks and things even used in 911? Apparently some guy was trying to drive out with a dump truck full of gold out of the buildings during 911. People sold stocks or made different other kinds of bets on stocks, however the stock market works, before 9/11, knowing that American Airlines or something else would crash or something. There's all kinds of evidence, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, Webster Tarpley's books, or many other books. Like I said, it's these people in their planning, assuming the rest of us are going to remain ignorant. Some would blame our current problems on an organized conspiracy. I wish it were so simple. Members of a conspiracy can be rooted out and brought to justice. This system, however, is fueled by something far more dangerous than conspiracy. It is driven not by a small band of men, but by a concept that has become accepted as gospel. The idea that all economic growth benefits humankind, and that the greater the growth, the more widespread the benefits. This belief also has a corollary that those people who excel at stroking the fires of economic growth should be exalted and rewarded, while those born at the fringes are available for exploitation. So if you're not in these elite groups, everybody else is available for exploitations. And regrettably, with the Talmudic, Zionist, Jewish books I read and studied, they think that the Gentile is is available for exploitations because they are exalted. And I'm not making this stuff. Go read the Protocols of Zion, the book Bloody Zion. Go watch my videos. Jack Bernstein, the American Jew who moved to Israel and came back and told all. And then watch my videos from information I got from the Encyclopedia Judaica. The problem with the particular people in Zionism and Jewish people in the last couple thousand years was forever going on. Way before I was born, way before my father was born, my grandfather was born, his grandfather was born. And I've gone over that in my videos on the Encyclopedia Judaica. Communism or the Kabbalah or Zionism or anti-Semitism. It just amazed me how this problem has been existing for a couple thousand years without question. The Jews were banned from Spain hundreds of years ago, Britain hundreds of years ago. So it's not just Jewish people, because it's not all Jewish people. A lot of Jewish people, good Jewish people, have written books or made famous speeches. Benjamin Friedman comes to mind. That's in one of my recent videos. Even President John Kennedy said in his famous speech that secret societies are repugnant to the American way of life, and I intend to expose it. So it's not all Jews, but it is apparently some Jewish people into some kind of Luciferic satanic cult that turned away from God, the Ten Commandments, and went towards the dark side for selfish reasons. And it's not just Jews. There's many other people who join in this program. You don't have to be a part of any particular religion to go towards the dark side, to be an evil, perverted person, a murderer. Crazy thing when you start looking into this stuff. All right, moving on. The concept is, of course, erroneous. We know that in many countries, economic growth benefits only a small portion of the population and may, in fact, result in the increasing desperate circumstances for the majority of people. And that's the way it is. They don't want you to know that. The more this thing moves along, this new age, this new world order, this automation of everything, computerized everything, the more they're going to build up more gates and more cameras and more fences and monitor us. And it's obvious it's going to boil down to microchipping people, face recognition, tracking. This effect is reinforced by the corollary belief that the captains of industry who drive this system should enjoy a special status. So the elites will enjoy a special status, whether you call it capitalism or communism, and you throw both of them into a blender and come out with the New World Order. A belief that is the root of many of our current problems and is perhaps also the reason why conspiracy theories abound. When men and women are rewarded for greed, greed becomes a corrupting motivator. When we equate the gluttonous consumption of the earth's resources with the status approaching sainthood, when we teach our children to emulate people who live unbalanced lives, and when we define huge sections of the population as subservient to the elite minority, we ask for trouble and we get it. Moving on this book, like I said, John Perkins is a smarter guy than I, and I'm just reading what he put in this book. And I think just this preface is all I'm reading so far. And I think we need to listen and think about this stuff. Go get the book, read the details, the gory details. Remember, he mentions at the beginning of this that two of his friends, the president of Ecuador, the president of Panama, were assassinated because they couldn't be bought off. And how many other leaders all over the world couldn't be bought off? Look after what happened in 9/11. Gaddafi was prepared to take his gold and use it to finance growth in healthy things in the African countries, water plants, sewer plants. And he was going to use that gold to loan them money for improvements and betterment of their people, interest-free. And you've got to know that these organizations that created the economic hitman didn't want that. Just like oil is a big money maker, why do you think they went into Iraq? Just like opium is a big money maker, why do you think they went into Afghanistan, Vietnam? So much more. Indonesia, gold, oil, so much more. These elitists are everywhere. If I'm trying to prove anything in this particular video, go buy this book from used book site, new bookstore, John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's what I do. I read the books and I report. I do it the best I can. So people will get off the couch and go out there and do it and show it to their friends. Read the book, buy the book, and then after you're done, give it to one of your friends, family members, and say, man, you got to read this. In their drive to advance the global empire, corporation banks and governments, collectively the corporatocracy, use their financial and political muscle to ensure that our schools, businesses, and media support both the fallacious concept and its corollary. They have brought us to a point where our global culture is a monstrous machine that requires exponentially increasing amounts of fuel and maintenance, so much so that in the end it will have consumed everything in sight and will be left with no choice but to devour itself. The corporatocracy is not a conspiracy, but its members do endorse common values and goals. So these elites have some common values and goals. One of the corporatocracy's most important functions is to perpetuate and continually expand and strengthen the system. So they have to continually work at strengthening their system. And the more that they strengthen it, the more that we get enslaved. The more they control our food, our gas, our water, our beer, our wine, some people's marijuana, drugs, pharmaceuticals, access to care. They're playing games with our life. The lives of those who make it and their accoutrements, their mansions, their yachts, their private jets, are presented as models to inspire all of us to consume. Consume, consume. Every opportunity is taken to convince us that purchasing things is our civic duty, that pillaging the earth is good for the economy and therefore serves our higher interest. John Perkins says, people like me are paid outrageous, huge salaries to do the system's bidding. If we falter, a more malicious form of hitman, the jackal, steps up to the plate, and if the jackal fails, then the job falls to the military. So you see how it works? First they try to bribe these leaders, like they did in Iraq. like they did in Iran, like they did so many other places, Panama, Ecuador, all over the world. And then if these leaders are like President John Kennedy and reject those offers, then they send in the jackal, the assassin. And if that doesn't work, hey, the American people, the world's people in Europe, they believe what's in the newspapers. You can convince them of anything because they just don't read books and they just don't think. They're idiots. So we'll just say these people from this other country are evil. This leader is killing his own kind. We can send in the military. Do you see how it works? How it has worked? And there's plenty of evidence. There's plenty of books written by some very smart people. I have a whole 6-foot-tall bookshelf right there just full of these kinds of books. That's why I just made the one on crossing the Rubicon with Michael Rupert. I've only read a couple pages. I got a lot more to do. Providing I can keep breathing and moving forward, I'll keep sharing the videos and sharing the books. But will it do any good? That is the question. This book is the confession of a man who, back when I was an economic hitman, was part of a relatively small group. People who played similar roles are more abundant now. So like we say, the system is growing. The divide is growing. The New World Order is growing. We can see it everywhere. We've seen food prices go off the chart. We've seen chemicals dumped in the sky, heart transmitters, weather control, weather warfare, and so much more. We, the people, have no idea when they have nuclear radiation links at nuclear power plants and storage facilities. They don't tell us. You get one of these little meters here, and you set it next to your computer. And you can tell what's going on every day. And it does go up and down. It's at 18 counts per minute now. Sometimes I sit here and I look over and I get a little bit shook up. It's like 39 or something. And I know there's a cloud of radiation going over where I live, hitting me. So you can go online and get these things, because you have to. You have to be proactive. About $100, and you hook it up to your computer. They got an online network. You can see people with meters all across the country and see the different spikes. A lot of times there's areas where it's evacuation level, but do you ever hear of them evacuating anybody? Just saying. All right. They have more. They have different kinds of titles. They walk the corridors of Monsanto, General Electric, Nike, General Motors, Walmart, nearly every other major corporation in the world. In a very real sense, Confessions of an Economic Hitman is their story as well as mine. It is your story too, the story of your world and mine, of the first truly global empire. This is all prophesized, and it's prophesized to be created by the Antichrist and their followers, the satanic religions and cults and secret societies. I know a lot of people don't want to hear it, but it is what it is. People go, Rick, you start talking about religion and I just turn it off. You've been programmed to turn it off. Imagine this big system. They don't want you thinking and knowing. But who are you going to believe? If you don't believe me, go get books like this, or the other ones I'm going to go over, or the ones I've already gone over. Go on the internet. Look up other videos. If you look at all, you can't deny what I'm saying is true. Then, of course, the million-dollar question is, what are you going to do about it? And, of course, I do not advocate violence or anything like that. If I advocate anything, and they don't want you to know this, it's talking to God. Now, there's some power they're afraid of. Did you know that? Remember, I go over those books To Eliminate the Opaque, Volume 1, Volume 2, by Rabbi Marvin Antleman. The opaque means your belief in God. It gives you comfort and strength. You can get miracles just like Jesus did. And I'm not trying to just be Christian. Other religions had prophets and leaders and shamans who conversed and communicated with the other side. I'm not in this for the exclusive promotion of the other side. God, the creator, angels in that world. I want everybody to believe that it does exist. And it didn't just occur in the Middle East. All over the world they had shamans and doctors, holistic healers. In India, in China, Buddha, the Hindu religion. So many. They don't want you to believe in that. This book was written so that we may take heed and remold our story. I am certain that when enough of us become aware of how we are being exploited by the economic engine that creates an insatiable appetite for the world's resources, how many countries lately have fallen so these elites can take over the resources of that nation and basically work the people as slaves to get those resources, and results in systems that foster slavery. We will no longer tolerate it. So John Perkins is saying, if we wake up and see the truth, we will no longer tolerate it. But you know what? The organizations of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party will call up their little troops everywhere, the blind believers, and they'll be down there protesting this or that. And when asked why they are there, like the Women's March at President Donald Trump's inauguration, one lady said, I don't know why I'm here. I just wanted to be part of it. And then somebody said there was all kinds of websites on the internet where you could go on to and make your travel plans and know where to check in and know what to do. So all this stuff is organized. Even when the Supreme Court passed the legislation about gay marriage, whatever that thing that they announced was, I think it was that no states can ban it. Anyways, all across the country, including the White House, that night, there were gigantic rainbow colors on bridges in the White House and buildings and states all over, cities all over the country and the world. I don't mean to be a dummy here, but how much time does it take to plan that and put up those fixtures, purchase those fixtures? It was all planned for our consumption. You don't think there's a spiritual aspect to this? It was planned for our consumption, just like 9/11. Just like all those shootings and terror attacks and mind control. So much evidence. Go watch the videos. Don't believe me. Please go watch the videos. Listen to people. Look at the evidence. I think people are intelligent. I think they can look at the evidence and make a decision and say, it's this or this. These elites are making decisions at our expense every day. And apparently there's going to be a bad day coming if we don't wake up. How many times have I said this in my videos? Anyways, we will reassess our role in a world where a few swim in riches and the majority drown in poverty, pollution, and violence. We will commit ourselves to navigating a course towards compassion, democracy, and social justice for all. Admitting to a problem is the first step towards finding a solution. Confessing a sin is the beginning of redemption. Let this book, then, be the start of our salvation. Let us inspire Let it inspire us to new levels of dedication and drive us to realize our dream of balanced and honorable societies. So we can dream of a balanced and honorable society. I guess you can see why I wanted to read that preface. It was pretty powerful. I wish I could read everything from this book, but I can't. It's just a filler slot for series number 7, and I did read it back then, so if somebody were watching my videos in the sequence of when I read the books or chose them back in 2013-14, this being in series number 7 slot instead of the next one I make will be series number 144. But this was a powerful book back then for me and my personal education. Things that woke me up and decided for me so that I would make videos. Alright, this chapter starts at page 12, and it's called Chapter 2, In for Life. So I just had to choose some simple things to read to give people the gist. This whole thing is full of so much. The United States invades Panama, Chapter 30. Panama, another presidential death. Chapter 26, Ecuador's presidential death. Chapter 24, Ecuador's president battles big oil. You see who's doing this stuff? Chapter 19, Confessions of a Tortured Man. Chapter 16, Pimping and Financing Osama bin Laden. I kid you not. Chapter 14, Entering a New and Sinister Period in Economic History. John Perkins tells it all. Chapter 11, Pirates of the Canal Zone. These poor people in all these third world countries all over the world have suffered and died and been robbed of everything, their natural resources, for a long time. That's just fact. Alright, so Chapter 2, In for Life. In legal parlance, Maine, it's the name of the corporation he worked for, or at least that's what he says in this book, M-A-I-N. And apparently it's like Arthur Little, Stone and Webster, Brown and Root. That would be the Bush organization. Halliburton, Dick Cheney organization, or Bechtel. All these big corporations, and even Tex Mars in one of his newsletters to me, said that the CEOs of most of these world corporations that control everything in the world had Jewish CEOs. I thought that was ludicrous. How could that be? But I took it upon myself to get a notebook. I've showed it in previous videos. Looked up the top 100 corporations and went on the internet to find out who the presidents were. And guess what? Tex Mars was correct. He even led me to some very interesting discoveries. Eric Schmidt, CEO for Google, Eric Schmidt in a numerology calculator equals 666. Pierre Pinault, a guy over there in Europe who was one of the behind the scenes conspirators to form the European Union, get all those countries to join one union, like the 50 states in the United States. His name in the numerology calculator is 666. The word computer is 666. Monsanto is 666. Go on the internet and see how many other words that you are aware of are 666. You will be astonished. You will say there's something to this. Aleister Crowley, the evilest man alive, so they called him, changed the spelling of his name to be 666. Anyways, back to the book. In legal parlance, Maine, that was the name of the corporation, would be called a closely held corporation. Roughly 5% of its 2,000 employees owned the company. They were referred to as partners and associates, and their position was coveted. Sounds like a legal firm, I guess. Not only did the partners have power over everyone else, but they also made the big bucks. Discretion was their hallmark. They dealt with heads of state and other chief executive officers who expect their consultants, like their attorneys and psychotherapists, to honor a strict code of absolute confidentiality. Talking with the press was taboo. It simply was not tolerated. As a consequence, hardly anyone outside Maine had ever heard of us, although many were familiar with our competitors, such as Arthur D. Little, Stone and Webster, Brown and Root, Halliburton, and Bechtel. I use the term competitor loosely because, in fact, Maine was in a league by itself. So that's the company this guy worked for. So reading a little bit more, I skipped over some stuff in this chapter. I'm going, apparently, out of nowhere while he was in the library, this attractive, intelligent-looking woman sat down beside him and seemed to be paying attention to him. And finally, she slid over a book open to a certain page to him and all of a sudden said to him, "I have been sent to train you." So they used an attractive, intelligent woman to train him, take over his life, apparently even causing his separation with his wife. John Perkins. Claudine told me that there were two primary objectives to my work. First, I was to justify huge international loans that would funnel money back to Maine and other U.S. companies such as Bechtel, Halliburton, Stone and Webster, Brown and Root through massive engineering and construction projects. Secondly, I would work to bankrupt the countries that received these loans. He would work to bankrupt the countries that received these loans after they had paid Maine and other U.S. contractors, of course, so that they would be forever beholden to their creditors, and so they would present easy targets when we needed favors, including military bases, UN, United Nations votes, or access to oil or other natural resources. So we know the secret societies are behind our presidents, representatives, congressmen, other leaders, corporations, these secret societies, Council of Foreign Relations, Heritage Foundation, Bohemian Grove, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Illuminati, Club of Rome, the Vatican, and so much more. Talmudists, Kabbalists, Zionists, and apparently they're behind the corporations, of course. And they will assassinate people who turn them down or do not cooperate. And they bribe people. These are the people controlling our world. Does that alarm anyone? Does anybody think that is sustainable? Where's this going? This book was written in 2005. And again, I ask, where's this going? What kind of programming are we seeing on TV? What are they telling us with the movies? My job, she said, was to forecast the efforts of investing billions of dollars in a country. Specifically, I would produce studies that projected economic growth 20 to 25 years in the future, and that evaluated the impacts of a variety of projects. For example, if a decision was made to lend a country $1 billion to persuade its leaders not to align with the Soviet Union, I would compel the benefits of investing that money in power plants with the benefits of investing in a new national railroad network or a telecommunications system, Or I might be told that the country was being offered the opportunity to receive a modern electrical utility system, and it would be up to me to demonstrate that such a system would result in a significant economic growth to justify the loan. But up above it said his intention, what he was trained to do, was to eventually bankrupt the country so that the New World Order powers could control it. And we know what they think of we, the people, the citizens. The critical factor in every case was gross national product, the project that resulted in the highest average annual growth of GNP1. If only one project was under consideration, I would need to demonstrate that developing it would bring superior benefits to the GNP. So here you are approaching a third world country, convincing the leader to borrow $1 billion. And by the way, here's a briefcase full of millions for you. And your country is going to grow and prosper. But these corporations know full well they never intend to see the citizens, we the people, live healthy economic lives. The same forces controlling the CIA and other organizations are distributing drugs, cocaine, and all kinds of other things to these people. The citizens all over the world have been used and abused by these forces. Does anybody doubt that? The unspoken aspect of every one of these projects was that they were intended to create large profits for the contractors and to make a handful of wealthy and influential families in the receiving countries very happy, while assuring the long-term financial dependence and therefore the political loyalty of the governments around the world. The larger the loan, the better. The fact that the debt burden placed on the country would deprive its poorest citizens of health, education, and other social services for decades to come was not taken into consideration. Claudine and I openly discussed the deception nature of GNP, the deceptive nature of GNP. For instance, the growth of GNP may result even when it profits only one person, such as an individual who owns a utility company, and even if the majority of the population is burdened with debt. The rich get richer and the poor grow poorer, yet from a statistical standpoint, this is recorded as an economic progress. So if the leader of the utility company makes $10 million and the people are all starving, the economic statistics, the factors they use, is a $10 million gross national product. No matter if it goes to one person owning a big company and the population of the whole city or whatever is dying or starving. Or in the Middle East, they're being bombed to smithereens. Maybe some elites are getting big checks and the GNP is looking pretty good for them while the people are being killed. It's all deceptive. Like U.S. citizens in general, most Maine employees believed we were doing countries favors when we built power plants, highways, and ports. Our schools and our press have taught us to perceive all of our actions as altruistic. Over the years, I've repeatedly heard comments like, if they're going to burn the U.S. flag and demonstrate against our embassy, why don't we just get out of that country and let them wallow in their own poverty? That it's these elites taking advantage of everything, causing the problems. Not the people, but the people will be the targets, the ones blamed in the end. That's part of the game, part of the plan. People who say such things often hold diplomas certifying that they are well educated. However, these people have no clue that the main reason we establish embassies around the world is to serve our own interest, which during the last half of the 20th century meant turning the American Republic into a global empire. And again, who controls America? Back before World War I, 1913, 1912, the Zionist Jewish elite went to the president before President Woodrow Wilson and said, we want you to do this and that, and we want to reestablish Palestine as the homeland for Israel, etc., etc. And the president of the United States at that time said no. So they said, well, the next president will do our bidding. We will put him in office. And like I said, for the last couple thousand years, the Jewish people, the few people versus the many of us, they have always been very powerful. And I just question what kind of sinister forces are behind the scenes with the Kabbalah, Illuminati, cults, and societies. Who really controls Earth? What kind of forces are above the human domain who are involved? What are Watchers, Archons, Palladians, Anunnaki, Reptilian, Gray Aliens, spiritual beings? So that's what I've been trying to point out. It seems like I'm drifting in this video or other videos. I'm just trying to say, until we open up our eyes and realize there are books out there that are saying it's time that we wake up. There are other forces involved. This is the age of Aquarius. When Jesus was born was the beginning of the age of Pisces. We've got to start believing in our own abilities, our own spiritual worth. What kind of entities are we? When we do leave this planet, and nobody gets off planet Earth alive, none of us humans, and our souls go to wherever they go, well, how will we justify what we did and how we lived and what we saw and when we did something or when we did nothing? I think that's kind of important, to think that we are really worth more than what we think. It's not just a passage of time to get rich and wealthy and abuse people, have sex with as many people as you can, steal from as many people as you can. I'm not trying to preach here. Actually, what I'm trying to do is save the world, my tiny little contribution, to be the world I grew up in, where I could go off into the woods and camping and walking with the dog, or go sailing or snorkeling and fishing. It just seems there are forces trying to destroy our planet and our world, and it saddens me. It saddens me for all the younger people that come after me, all the children and their children. These elites have no love for us. This guy is confessing, telling all. I've only read a tidbit of this. There's so much stuff in this book. I've read all this stuff up here. Several chapters. Got my little tabs there. But I decided this is the chapter and information I wanted to share in this video. Alright, so the rich get richer and the poor grow poorer. Yet from a statistical standpoint, this is recorded as economic progress. Alright. Moving on here where I left off. Despite credentials, such people are as uneducated as those 18th century colonists who believed that the Indians fighting to defend their lands were servants of the devil. So again, I agree with a lot of people when they say, Rick, this has been going on for a while. I agree. But that doesn't mean we need to be apathetic and believe that ignorance is bliss and let it go on forever, because it assumes, it appears, get my words straight, that it's going to get worse. Within several months, I would leave for the island of Java in the country of Indonesia, described at that time as the most heavily populated piece of real estate on the planet. Indonesia also happened to be oil-rich Muslim nations and a hotbed of communist activity. It's the next domino after Vietnam, is the way Claudine put it. We must win the Indonesians over. If they join the communist bloc, well, and then she drew a finger across her throat, I guess that means dead, and then smiled sweetly. Let's just say you need to come up with a very optimistic forecast of the economy, how it will mushroom after all the new power plants and distribution lines are built. That will allow U.S. aid and international banks to justify the loans. You'll be well rewarded, of course, and can move on to other projects in exotic places. The world is your shopping cart. She went on to warn me that my role would be tough. Experts at the banks will come after you. It's their job to punch holes in your forecast. That's what they're paid to do. Making you look bad makes them look good. One day I reminded Claudine that the main team being sent to Java included 10 other men. I asked if they were receiving the same type of training as me. She assured me they were not. He was spending a lot of time at Claudine's apartment, this attractive, intelligent woman. They're engineers, she said. They design power plants, transmission and distribution lines, and seaports and roads to bring in the fuel. You're the one who predicts the future. Your forecasts determine the magnitude of the systems they design and the size of the loans. You'll see, it's the key. Every time I walked away from Claudine's apartment, I wondered whether I was doing the right thing. Somewhere in my heart, I suspected I was not. But the frustrations of my past haunted me. Maine seemed to offer everything my life had lacked, and yet I kept asking myself if Tom Paine would have approved. In the end, I convinced myself that by learning more, by experiencing it, I could better expose it later. The old working from the inside justification. When I shared this idea with Claudine, she gave me a perplexed look. Don't be ridiculous. Once you're in, you can never get out. You must decide for yourself before you get any deeper. I understood her, and what she said frightened me. So I remember at the beginning of this book, when I started this video, John Perkins, after 20-something years, told his daughter he wanted to publish the book but was afraid. And his daughter said, do it, and if they get you, I'll take over, and we're doing it for our grandchildren. So again, I keep saying there are good people out there. And the problem is there's not enough good people stepping up to the plate. After I left, I strolled down Commonwealth Avenue, turned onto Dartmouth Street, and assured myself that I was the exception. One afternoon, some months later, Claudine and I sat in a window setting, watching the snowfall on Beacon Street. We're a small, exclusive club, she said. We're paid, well paid. We cheat countries around the globe out of billions of dollars. So that means they're cheating we the people all over the world. The citizens. Think about that. Even the United States. Giving, $90 billion between 48 and 1970 to Israel. During that same time, the whole world did not get $90 billion. Do you think that's fair? And when the people of Israel, the people who write books like the Jewish Utopia, have plans for a new age and a new world order. And apparently it matches material in the Bible of an Antichrist and all the satanic, sinister rituals, and they've demonstrated even in the tunnel opening in Switzerland. Big goat on the Hoover Dam, the goddess of destruction, Shiva on the Empire State Building. If you've watched my videos, you know I can mention dozens of different examples. Super Bowl halftime shows, the Eurovision, like the American Idol program in 2014. Who won that? Madonna, Beyonce, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry. These rituals during Emmys and Grammys where they even wear horns. You can't make this up. It's like out of an Indiana Jones movie. A large part of your job is to encourage world leaders to become part of a vast network that promotes U.S. commercial interests. And remember, who controls the USA? The secret societies, the Zionists, even as Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Sharon, said, don't worry about America, we control America. All the presidents of the United States are mostly related and from the Freemasonic organizations or other secret societies. These are facts. Go get Fritz Springmeier's book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Go watch my videos, hundreds of them. I've gone over books about these topics. It seems to be, without a question, true. In the end, those leaders become ensnarled in a web of debt that ensures their loyalty. We can draw on them whenever we desire to satisfy our political, economic, and military needs. In turn, those leaders bolster their political positions by bringing industrial parks, power plants, and airports to their people. Meanwhile, the owners of U.S. engineering and construction companies become very wealthy. That afternoon, in the idyllic setting of Claudine's apartment, relaxing in the window while the snow swirled around outside, I learned the history of the profession I was about to enter. Alright, so there was other part here. Wanted to wrap up this video. Alright, moving on. Claudine described how throughout most of history, empires were built largely through military force or the threat of it. But with the end of World War II, the emergence of the Soviet Union, and the specter of nuclear holocaust, the military solution became just too risky. The decisive moment occurred in 1951 when Iran rebelled against a British oil company that was exploiting Iranian natural resources and its people. So when countries wake up about this, bad things can happen. The company was the forerunner of British Petroleum, today's BP. That would be the company that had a big oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. The company who was spraying some chemical on all that slick oil and not telling anybody what kind of chemical they were dumping. In response, the highly popular democratically elected Iranian Prime Minister and Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized all Iranian petroleum assets, and outraged England sought the help of her World War II ally, the United States. However, both countries feared that military retaliation would provoke the Soviet Union into taking action on behalf of Iran. Instead of sending in the Marines, therefore, Washington dispatched CIA agent Kermit Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's grandson. He performed brilliantly then to winning people over through payoffs and threats. He then enlisted them to organize a series of street riots and violent demonstrations, which created the impression that Mossadegh, I'm saying this Iranian leader's name wrong, I'm sure, was both unpopular and inept. And I remember they've been doing this with leaders all over the world, even saying Assad, the leader of Syria, is gassing his own people. So they've been doing these things quite a while, deceiving us, and we the people continue to buy it. In the end, Mossadegh went down, and he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. The pro-American Mohammad Reza Shah became the unchallenged dictator. Kermit Roosevelt had set the stage for a new profession, the one whose ranks I was joining. By 1968, the year I interviewed with the NSA, it had become clear that if the United States wanted to realize its dream of a global empire, remember, this global empire is not for we the people. We are not a part of it. Apparently, we are the enemy of our own government. Jade Helm 15 and so much more evidence, spying on us Americans, monitoring us, deceiving us, giving us choices like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump as choices for president is, in my opinion, an insult to the people of the USA. I mean, it was just a bizarre election. I don't think too many people will deny that. So the United States wanted to realize its dream of a global empire, and the United States, of course, is controlled by the secret societies that are into these Illuminati satanic cults, including the communist and the Zionist, including the Vatican and all these secret societies, Council of Foreign Relations, Heritage Foundation. They're everywhere. Most people just don't want to admit it. As envisioned by men like Presidents Johnson and Nixon, it would have to employ strategies molded on President Roosevelt's Iranian example. This was the only way to beat the Soviets without the threat of nuclear war. And a lot of people know today the Cold War, again, was part of the New Age, New World Order scam to keep everybody convinced it was real, while a lot of money was spent on defending this country and fighting off the Cold War. So, again, the elites control the world. And there are books on these topics. I will be reading them and sharing that information, if I haven't already. There was one problem, however. Kermit Roosevelt was a CIA employee. He had been caught. The consequences would have been dire had he been caught. He had orchestrated the first U.S. operation to overthrow a foreign government. And Lord knows how many they've done since then. And it was likely that many more would follow, but it was important to find an approach that would not directly implicate Washington. Fortunately for the strategist, the 1960s also witnessed another type of revolution, the empowerment of international corporations, of the multinational organizations such as the World Bank and the IMF, the International Money Fund. The latter was financially primarily financed by the United States and our sister empire builders in Europe. These would be the elites, the Illuminati, the banksters, the Zionists, the people who control our presidents, congressmen, representatives. The symbiotic relationships developed between governments, corporations, and multinational organizations. So it's so interesting how they're just redesigning the system so that our leaders will be controlled by the corporations, and we think we're electing our leaders. And our leaders have very little power. The corporations control them. They don't do what they're told. They lose their jobs. That means they lose their mansions. They lose their yachts. Their kids can't go to their colleges. It will be the elites against the rest of us. So it seems. By the time I enrolled in BU's business school, a solution to the Roosevelt as CIA agent problem had already been worked out. U.S. intelligence agencies, including the NSA, National Security, would identify prospective EHMs, economic hitmen, who could then be hired by international corporations, people like John Perkins. The EHMs would never be paid by the government. Instead, they would draw their salaries from the private sector, these corporations that were set up. As a result, their dirty work, if exposed, would be chalked up to the corporate greed rather than the government policy. And corporations have been caught in the past. And of course, usually they just go out of business or change their name. In addition, the corporations that hired them, although paid by the government agencies and their multinational banking counterparts with taxpayer money, would be insulated from congressional oversight and public scrutiny. And remember, these days, like President Bush was calling for, and apparently they're doing, they want to privatize everything, including prisons. So it protects the congressmen and the government, and they can just blame it on corporate greed or find some individuals to be the scapegoats. People who might conveniently be killed. Shielded by a growing body of legal initiatives, including trademark, international trade, and freedom of information laws. So you see, Claudine concluded, we are just the next generation in a proud tradition that began back when you were in the first grade. This is this last part. I flipped over a page that I read and I was a little taken back by it. But now John Perkins is going to depart from his relationship with Claudine and go to work. Listen to this. One day in 1971, about a week before my scheduled departure for Indonesia, I arrived at Claudine's place to find a small dining room table set with an assortment of cheeses and breads, and there was a fine bottle of Bourgeois, I guess wine. She toasted me. You've made it, she smiled, but somehow it seemed less than sincere. And she said, you're now one of us. We chatted casually for half an hour or so. Then, as we were finishing off the wine, she gave me a look unlike any I had ever seen before. She said, never admit to anyone about our meeting. She said in a stern voice, I won't forgive you if you do. Ever. And I'll deny I ever met you. She glared at me. Perhaps the only time I felt threatened by her, and then gave a cold laugh. Talking about us would make life dangerous for you. This is serious business. I was stunned. I felt horrible. But later, as I walked alone back to the Prudential Center, I had to admit the cleverness of the scheme. The fact is that all our time together had been spent in her apartment. There was not a trace of evidence about our relationship, and no one at Maine was implicated in any way. There was also part of me that appreciated her honesty. She had not deceived me the way my parents had about the Tilton and Middlebury, whatever that means. So at this time, he'd already separated from his wife, and his wife and him had separate apartments. So I think she was suspicious to what was going on with Claudine and John. And Claudine, it was just a professional duty. And she said if he ever talked about it, it would be dangerous for him. So I've only read a tidbit from this book. I did want to make sure I showed people the book and read something from it. There are many examples in this book of the meetings and association and the time he spent with presidents of Ecuador, Panama and many other people all over the world, and the travels that he went on, and all the dirty details about how they get these countries to go into bankruptcy and promise all kinds of money and wealth and growth, and they fully intend to see them under their political control. And if the leaders reject or resist, they might get assassinated by jackals, another group of people behind the economic hitman. And if that fails, then of course there will be a convenient war and propaganda in the newspapers, which of course the not so educated public will consume while they're drinking their beer or coffee or wine, watching the nightly news. They just believe what they hear and see. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.